Welcome. We are broadcasting live from the mothership. You are tuned in and listening to Starseed Energy Radio with your host Jonah Bolt. Starseed Energy Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. Starseed Energy Radio goes live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, what's up, Spaceship Earth? Thanks for tuning in. You are now receiving a live transmission from Starseed Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. I'm your host, Jonah Bolt, the Octorian Starseed. We are broadcasting live on this beautiful Tuesday, September 11th, 2015. Oh, I said September. It's August 11th, 2015. And we're broadcasting live from Costa Rica, San Jose. We have lots of news headlines to cover. But first, I want to say a shout out to starseedradio.com, where you can always find the latest news and updates. We have several news feeds on there and also live space and earth change trackers. Stay informed with the information and the news out there. Going to drop some headlines on the daily download, but first, we want to give out that 800 number. We are still giving away free pieces of Elite Shungite. If you haven't gotten a free piece of Elite Shungite, it's an amazing quantum healing stone. It stops EMF signals, smart meters, purifies water. I drink Shungite water myself every day. Please call toll-free anytime, 24/7. Toll-free number is 888-400-2328. Or you can also call us for our free energy information. I have about 15 PDF files I've collected and want to get this information out to you. So you could also fill out the form on starseedtechnologies.com. And I would love to send you this free energy information, how to build your own devices, and also tons of information on what free energy is and also the history on free energy devices here in the U.S. So again, that number, toll free, is 888-400-2328, or you can check starseedtechnologies.com. We also have an amazing new product which we announced a few weeks ago, the Net Zero Power Generator, which we're now just endorsed by the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize winner, saying that this Net Zero generator, which we are now selling and also offering 100% financing, this is an amazing, amazing world game changer. So please contact starseedtechnologies.com or call toll-free 888-400-2328. The quote of the day: football, beer, and above all gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not difficult. That was George Orwell, and I have to agree with that. Sports, just like the gladiator games, is just keeping people busy as the Roman Empire is burning around them. George Orwell. Now for the daily download of the day, we have some awesome headlines to cover and some not so awesome headlines. We'll start off with the most prevalent news. I'm sure people over the weekend and also this week have heard about the Ferguson flaring up again. We have the Ferguson embattled as shooting breaks out again. We also had the Oath Keepers as part of this. We had InfoWars out there. Some people are saying that InfoWars hired the Oath Keepers to be there. Police and riot gear through tear gas. It was a mess if you've seen some of the footage. But Ferguson, unlike other cities in Detroit and other, are really becoming embattled, impoverished, really just run-down cities. If you haven't heard of Agenda 21, I urge you to check out what Agenda 21 is and what it is doing to cities, not just here in America, but all across the world. California to throw adults in jail if you refuse government-mandated vaccines. That's right. This news article coming from naturalnews.com. We're talking about Senate Bill 792, also known as the Daycare Facilities Immunization Exemptions Act, was presented quietly alongside SB 277, which eliminates personal, philosophical, and religious vaccine exemptions for children who attend both private and public schools in the Golden State. The bill was recently heard by the California Assembly Human Services Committee, reads as follows. And the article goes on to say about the bill. Now, we've been talking about this for a while, and years ago when I was saying that forced vaccines were coming and Obamacare was part of it, people called us crazy and conspiracy theorists. Well, there you go. California is pushing the first bill to mandate you. Even workers that work at daycares or any type of facility like that are mandated to get vaccines if this bill passes. So if you can, do what you can to say no to SB 792 and say no to SB 277 in California. Think the government doesn't spray citizens with chemicals and pathogens? Evidence release proves they already have. Now, this article and the topic of this, talking about the chemtrail phenomenon, has been happening for many, many years, that people call contrails. The people who are aware know that those are not contrails. Contrails dissipate within a few seconds, up to 20 seconds. Chemtrails stay in the sky, spread out, and turn and look like clouds. This article goes on to say that others have dismissed this as absurd, despite some regional testing by independent labs and other government-sponsored initiatives, such as the Air Force 1990s initiative to control the weather via modification by 2025, which could accomplish by cloud seeding, which is already a commercial venture. I'll post this article also up on starseedradio.com. This awesome article is about alternative energy, my favorite topic. The spherical sun power generator. This is a new power generator by German architect André Brossel. Believes he has a solution that can squeeze more juice out of the sun even during the night hours and in low light regions. His company Raw Lemon has created a spherical sun power generator prototype called the Beta Ray. His technology will combine spherical geometry principles with a dual axis tracking system, allowing twice the yield of a conventional solar panel in much smaller surface area. The futuristic design is fully rotational and is suitable for inclined surfaces. I'll post this article. You got to see the picture of this thing. It looks awesome, and I hope that these hit mainstream. This other news article is really cool. We've talked about this topic before, desalination of a water. There's a new nano chip. This nano water chip could make desalination affordable for everyone. With fresh water declining throughout the globe, desalination looks increasingly attractive, but current technologies are expensive, demand far too much energy, and are prone to contamination. Now, researchers from the University of Texas at Austin and the University of Marburg in Germany have developed a water chip that creates a small electrical field that separates salt from seawater. The technology, which is still under development and works at the nanoscale, uses so little energy it can run off a store-bought battery. Awesome news. Creator of Avatar turns his attention to real-world solar power. We're talking about James Cameron. Real-world solar power from the director of Avatar. If there is one man who is full of surprises, it is James Cameron, the director of Avatar. Mr. Cameron's innovations and ideas are often geared towards sustainable energy production, also known as renewable energy. Technologies such as solar, wind, and biofuels aid not in reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, but hold promise of unlimited supply. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Cameron, for taking that initiative and many others around the world to get sustainable, eco-friendly products to the mainstream. In other news, we have NASA has discovered Earth 2 in the search for a new home. Could Kepler 452b possibly be Earth 2? NASA recently announced the discovery of a new Earth-like planet. The planet was discovered using the Planet Searching Telescope launched 6 years ago, dubbed the Kepler 452b. The planet is the smallest ever found by NASA. The planet exists in the Goldilocks era. That means it is the right distance away from a star where there to be water to exist. It also means the temperature are not too cold so they can support life. Now, in watching this video and reading this article, there's also almost 5,000 other Earth-sized planets that have found that they also seem could have life in our near galaxy. We've talked about the number before of how many actual galaxies and stars and planets out there. The numbers are astronomical, and they keep going up as we keep searching. Conventional cancer industry supports aborted babies. Crushing for the profit. We're talking about the Planned Parenthood. Now, this article and what we've been talking about Planned Parenthood has just swept the nation. Now, some of the supporters, the list is too long to read, but I'm just going to mention a few here. We have Bank of America, Starbucks, Microsoft, and Susan G. Komen among 38 companies supporting Planned Parenthood's aborted baby organ trade. We've seen all these videos come out following the release of 2 undercover videos showing high-level Planned Parenthood executives negotiating prices with potential clients for aborted baby body parts, a felonious criminal operation including the illegal sale of vital organs and other tissue. A more through listing of private donors to this pro-abortion organization has surfaced, revealing who else in the corporate world is on board with this disgusting human chop shop endeavor. The list, if I read it, is just on and on and on. There's 30, there's Nike, there's Starbucks, Nike, Verizon, Wells Fargo. And of course, we have the American Cancer Society, and a big supporter of this is Susan G. Komen. So I'm going to vote Miss Susan G. Komen as our Game of Thrones Person of the Day. Thank you, Miss Susan G. Komen, for supporting some horrible thing. That's why we're putting you on the Game of Thrones throne. With that, that is it for your daily download. You can find all these articles on our feeds at starseedradio.com, where you can always find the latest news and updates there. And now we're going to jump to our special guest of the show. Now, this special guest has been all over the world, a truth seeker, a truth speaker, and she talks about a very, very hot topic. She was recruited a few years ago to go to the Mars colony, and many people have no idea or even a disbelief that there are people, in fact, living on Mars. We have had several people over the years come forward and talk about this topic and talk about the jump rooms, talking about the ETs, working with the Greys, working with reptilians. And a lot of this is common knowledge to people that actually research this stuff because the evidence is everywhere. With that, I want to bring on Miss Laura Eisenhower. For those of you who don't know who she is, the great-granddaughter of ex-President Dwight Eisenhower. Laura also is a big advocate for truth. She's going to be at an awesome festival in Asheville, North Carolina. We'll get into that towards the end of the show. But with that, we'd like to bring on Laura Eisenhower. Laura, how are you today? Laura, you with us? Let's see. And she may have her microphone on mute. Let's see. Okay. Okay, looks like the call dropped, and we'll bring her in. And let's see if she's here. Miss Laura Eisenhower, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thanks for joining us today on Starseed Radio. I know we had a little microphone Skype issue, so good we got you locked in right now. So I gave a little intro, Laura, on a little bit about your background, about how you were recruited to go to the Mars station there. So if you would back up a little bit from that, talk about, like to ask a lot of the guests we have on, when was your first sort of awakening to this new way of living, of energy and meditation and things like that? Did you grow up tuned in to crystals and energy or stuff like this, or did you live a very 3D life like I did and one day just had a spontaneous awakening?
I've always kind of been this way, I have to say. But I mean, there's certain layers that I think we wake up along the way. I mean, it's a tough one because as kids, we're beyond like this 3D world. We have vast imaginations. We're just, playful and more open and just in this kind of different energy. And I always wanted to maintain that. And I couldn't really understand all the other stuff. But stuff kind of attached onto me a little bit, just being human and going through the school systems. But I've always kind of been this way. I was much more into nature. I wasn't very disciplined as far as meditation goes, but I collected, rocks and stones and crystals along the way. And I was just very much like an outdoor person. And so that to me was like where I could really connect with spirit and kind of stay in that place. And then I just got really lost when I was in the school systems and I was just trying to navigate my way in the family energies, figuring out, what am I going to do for a living? Who am I? What's going on here? I always knew I had a mission and I could never articulate it because it was so out there that I just I couldn't really completely function as a human in a way that made people certain that I was going to make it in the 3D sort of way. And so I had to sort of build this other thing behind the scenes in order to be able to have it sustain me because I wasn't really able to do that other stuff. But I had a lot of friends that have gone through awakenings, and it's weird because, there's some people who are awake in their hearts, and there's some people who are awake in their minds, but there's not a lot of people that have both. So I've always come across one or the other, sometimes both. So the conspiracy stuff is, I was always aware of that too, but I don't think I ever imagined that it was as crazy as it actually is. So that was a huge one for me, is just getting a grip on all the stuff going on behind the scenes. The spiritual part, I wouldn't say that I fit the New Age model or anything traditional. I was just feeling the connection, just personally. but not really having a label for it or a discipline connected to it.
Now, you come from obviously a great line of bloodline, and I'm talking about your great-grandfather, Dwight David Eisenhower, who made some amazing speeches talking about the military-industrial complex, really bringing some of this stuff to light, trying to anyways, and that's sort of your mission as well, is to reveal not just only the true origins with the Magdalene and Gaia-Sophia energies, which we'll talk about, but also to liberate us from the military-industrial complex, which has really taken a grip on the entire world. As we see, America has military bases in 150 countries. We're at war all over the place, and it's really wreaking havoc all over the planet. So your mission now, from what I understand, is to expose as much as you can military-industrial complex, what's really going on. And like you said, most people just immediately dismiss it, because when you open up and when you actually believe that there's people living on Mars, it shatters your entire belief system that we've been taught our whole lives. And that's very, very scary for people. Even me diving into this information, it was like, whoa, are really reptilians, grays? What? But if you look at the evidence and you look back, I mean, the tribes talked about it. They're in ancient scriptures. They talked about they came down from the stars. The evidence is overwhelmingly factual. It's not made up. It's not mythical. It's not stories. So if you would, tell us how the Mars recruitment came into play.
Well, that happened in 2006. Throughout my whole life, I always felt some sort of controlling force on me. And, how are you supposed to explain that to people? Like, oh, I feel targeted. Something's got its attention on me, and I think it's within the shadow government or whatever. I mean, I didn't quite have a grip on it, so I pretty much thought it was just me and something was wrong with me. I'm like, okay, I got some really screwed up karma here. I better sort out, because something's going on and there's some sort of energy that is really blocking me or making it very difficult to create or manifest anything. And I finally gave up one day, and I found myself going back to the DC area, and I went to a gathering, and this man approached me, and to me it was just like maybe just how normal people meet. We're at a gathering, so people are going to be friendly. And but he was extremely familiar, and we hit it off, and we were just dialoguing about all this stuff. And it was sort of like a language, not a foreign language, but a language, that not a lot of people slip into, the sort of dialogue we were having, talking about archetypes, talking about the planetary body and the shift time, and it just got really intense. It was just like, whoa, okay, we're talking about all sorts of wild stuff. And anyway, we ended up seeing each other, and he went to DC to go to these meetings, and he would come visit me because I was staying at my mom's house trying to figure out what my next step was, because I just felt, really blocked. And he started to reveal to me what these meetings were about and how it had to do with going to Mars. And so I just thought this was, something in a space program that was something the public would know, something like a NASA thing, something maybe connected to something we would hear about, like as a later mission, like, oh, look at what we're doing in America. We are, going further than the moon. We're going to go to Mars. And I always questioned a lot of this stuff anyway that came out of NASA. So I was just like realizing along the way that this was the hidden layers, because this was very hush hush and it was not connected to NASA. And he was telling me that I was to go with them and go to Mars. And I was like, wondering who these people were that he was meeting with. And they're a special think tank. They're like a branch of MJ-12 connected to the CIA. And I would hear the names, and I would, hear about what their mission was about, through emails. I was on some of the threads. I saved those emails. And I was just trying to get a grip on it all. And, but it was very like hush hush, you can't really say anything. And I just thought I met a person that just had this going on in their life. And I just thought I just happened to be somebody he's interested in and wants to take me. And I'm like, okay, well, this is easy enough. I don't want to go, I do want to go to the stars, but I don't want to go like in some sort of military, like sort of hidden kind of agenda thing where I can't even talk about it. And I've got 2 kids. I'm not going to just go off to Mars. I mean, the target date was 2012, and they were talking about taking these ships called ARCs, A-R-C. And it was all sort of friendly and like, sounded like mysterious, and like, it was in the event of a cataclysm that we would have a place to go. And it sounded like, hey, that makes a lot of sense. So I had sort of an open mind to it. Like, okay, well, if it's really necessary, that's I mean, I have to have somewhat of an open mind to it and find out more. And it just got weirder and weirder. And I wasn't able to really connect with the people that he was talking to. It was all done through him. And things like looking glass technologies were mentioned, which is a quantum access technology that's able to read the past and read the future. And they use it to kind of tinker with timelines or get an idea of where the trajectory of humanity is going, but they're also able to control it too. And so anyway, I just started really paying attention to the conversations, trying to keep note of, what they were dialoguing about. And anyway, so a lot of it just sort of went away, and, we're in a relationship, and I was figuring maybe my imagination was running a little bit wild, trying to look way beyond the surface. And anyway, but we, had a relationship, and he was a very familiar person, and it was like a good connection. And I ended up moving to North Carolina to live with him. And then the whole Mars thing comes back up again, and it gets really weird. And, I'm just hearing all this stuff, and he's referring to people as handlers. He's getting phone calls and disappearing and not remembering where he went. He's having all these sort of contact experiences and being downloaded all this stuff about colonizing Mars, and they're working with him, and they want his information because they consider him to be a person that's pulling it together. And so many red flags went off, and I'm like, and I didn't have a Project Camelot. I wasn't well researched in any of this, but I was like thinking handler, okay, secret group, because when I did study the names, I saw their association with the CIA and MJ-12. But it just kind of got blown off because I just thought, maybe this is just kind of harmless because I just met somebody who's involved with this, but nobody's breathing down my neck saying that I have to go. My hope is that I would be able to convince him to stay on Earth, and I might be able to talk to these people and say, hey, let's all put our heads together here. What about this planet? What about taking care of humans? What about focusing on what is going on here before we go off someplace else, thinking that it's all sort of friendly and maybe I'd have that chance. But I knew, from the very beginning it was very difficult to connect with anybody but him. And I was just, vulnerable. I was a single mom of 2 twins, trying to raise them. And, I had my ideal hopes that it wasn't weird and I would have a voice about it. And anyway, it got later revealed to me that he was sent to that gathering to specifically pull me in, and that I was actually a mission that he was assigned to pull me in. And then I realized how locked into it I was and how much it wasn't really about, I just met somebody that's involved in this work and I can take it or leave it. It was like, it was presented to me like, well, actually you don't really have a choice. And this is what we're doing and you're going, whether you like it or not. And, but, as I observed him and did a lot of research, I was thinking, there was some sort of MyLab done, and these people, did something to him and then pulled him in and made him believe that the whole scenario is something that it isn't. And the amount of research I've done, to really get to the bottom of it is so incredibly vast. And I would say up until, this year, I've really pulled it all together, and that's what I present about. But, the whole Mars agenda has to do with, originally it had to do with protecting the human genome and, human DNA in the event of a catastrophe. But it got massively infiltrated. We had Project Paperclip, we had major Nazi infiltration, we had the Montauk Project, and all these different things that were able to sort of move their way into this. And then you've got all sorts of infiltrations in these different groups. But most, don't really know because there's compartmentalism. They can't see the bigger picture of what the whole operation is really about and what it means for humanity. They're just given their part. Like, this is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it. Like folks like Phil Schneider, who were helping to build underground bases. He thought he was helping humanity and realized he was helping the dark side, and then became a whistleblower and got murdered. So I did research and researched all these names. I wasn't finding a whole lot on them, but I wasn't going to give up. And I had all sorts of interesting dreams that were helping me to see, that I had a choice. I was either going to be controlled and be taken off planet, or I could stay on Earth and do my mission. And I chose to stay on Earth in my dream. And then I woke up and I was like, hey, I'm kind of seeing what's going on here, and I'm not going to do it. And it got really, really intense. And from that moment on, he knew that I was on to them, but he didn't know what I was on to. I was on to sort of the more negative aspects of it. And he figured I was just on to, the fact that I didn't really have a choice, and this was, maybe something that he needed to look at and he needed to be aware of because of what they were doing to him. And he was very stubborn. He didn't want to hear me, I was like, they're trying to turn you into a robot. Like something's wrong here. I mean, your whole family's implanted. Isn't that a clue? Like, I said, you're not getting legitimate downloads from an ET race. I'm like, there's some sort of manipulation going on. And then finally, I did break free. And when I studied these people more, I found information that matched up with some that I dug up that helped me to really see what I was dealing with, which had to do with artificial telepathy and my labs and psychotronic weaponry and mind control and all the things that I was getting a clue about, but not enough info about, but enough to go on. And then it just got stronger and stronger, and it continued to validate this was a really good idea. You didn't go with them because, basically it's all about a breakaway civilization and compromising humanity and them hoarding all the technology. And they have different projects and operations that are, a part of the building block of the whole agenda. And it's very difficult to see the bigger picture. And so I was like, all right, that's my job. I'm going to figure out the bigger picture and maybe get to the bottom of why they would want me. Okay, well, I'm sure it's a bloodline thing. A lot went on in the Eisenhower administration connected to this agenda. But I also have a strong mission I've been aware of my whole life, and I'm all about helping humanity to shift into higher earth energies, otherwise known as the ascension, not quite the definition that most people go by. There's a lot of distortions with all that. And so I've been trying to stay strong in my mission ever since and expose this hidden game going on that, has a lot to do with massive mind control, New World Order, colonizing other planets.
All right, Laura Eisenhower, thank you for that amazing updated story. But hang on right now. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to go more into the Mars colony, the jump rooms, and other whistleblowers that have come forward as well. We're talking with Laura Eisenhower on Starseed Radio.
Space Odyssey, look into the anomalies in...
Hello, citizens of America. We are anonymous, and we have been observing as your country's leaders have lied to you and placed your freedom and your constitutional rights into jeopardy. We are very disappointed about this, and we have decided to take steps against what you are facing. The world is watching America. We are also watching. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
All right, welcome back to the show. You're listening to Starseed Radio. We're joined by our very special guest, Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of Dwight David Eisenhower, talking about Mars colony, jump rooms, global elites, reptilians, greys, and the new Earth. Laura is an intuitive astrologist, global alchemist, cosmic mythologist, and she is on a profound mission to reveal our true origins connected with the Magdalene and Gaia-Sophia energies of love and wisdom, and works to liberate us from the military-industrial complex. Now, before we went to commercial break, Laura, you talked about your background, how you first got introduced to the being recruited to Mars. And in my own research over the years, I've had many people on the show that have talked about working with the government and making the jump rooms and the different technologies they use. And I found a really interesting article I'm going to post up. And this one is Laura Eisenhower's Mars story confirmed via CNN, time footage, and satellite photos. And this article goes on to say that with CNN and Time Mars news footage within the past year and satellite photos, that it shows really clearly buildings and other things that are on Mars using satellite images of Mars footage from CNN and Time added to the words spoken by you yourself. This videographer proves that human life on Mars is much closer than anyone in this position cares to admit. The second video in this article shows Mars in a dramatic fashion, high-resolution images, but that video was taken down, so you can't see that. But I'll post this article up. But as we were talking, there's been several people, many people that have come forward and talked about how they have been recruited to Mars, been to Mars. We had the third whistleblower confirm Obama's participation in the CIA jump room program of the early 1980s. 3 people now, credible people, have come forward and talked about that. So in your own research and being recruited to Mars, have you found anyone else, Laura, that also has been recruited in a similar situation like you?
Well, in the first article I did with Alfred Weber, I have a friend that was a witness to it that they saw me closely connected to, so they sort of brought her in as well. But they didn't talk directly to her. She talked to me and talked to my partner, and that was it. And he shared, some things about it, but it had more to do with the structure of it all and like, how to organize it and make it happen. And so she did a little bit of, talking with them or my partner about it and myself. And I was just telling her all the observations I was having because I was living with him and I was seeing it, up close and personal. And, as far as like anybody else besides that, I mean, I only know people that were in projects that relate to this agenda, like Andrew Bashago, who was in Project Pegasus. He said that they pre-identified me in 1972 before I was born and recognized our alliance in the future. And I don't know how much detail they gave him about me on Mars or anything like that. It just seems that they did see us at some point in the timeline. They have, chronovision and the ability to access future. So they were able to see this before I was even born. And that relates to teleporting to Mars. And I wasn't in any projects growing up. This came later in life. But I certainly was targeted at a young age in the hopes that they would be able to, bring me in and and manipulate me, And when I got out of it, they even admitted that they can't mind control me. And this was the way that they, wanted to do it, through a partner. And actually, I found out that the quantum access technologies located us in a past life and knew that we had a connection because they knew that, you're not going to just fall for somebody, and that's too much of a risk. There has to be some sort of familiarity. So they used him as bait. So nobody has really been in that particular situation. I'm sure there's similar stories. Anybody can Google the term honey trap, which is a technique that they use to manipulate people. They put plants in your life and they come in the form of potential romantic partners, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you find, oh my God, I'm in this black ops scenario where, I'm dealing with people that are agents. And so, I mean, I haven't met anybody that had something go on related to Mars, but I do know that they do that, but there's other operations and other things that they're doing besides colonizing Mars. So all I could do is just really look at people's stories that were related to Mars, like Michael Rife and Andrew Bashago, and later on, Randy Kramer, Captain K, and it just helped me to connect the dots of what this larger picture looks like. Then, of course, all the research about ET government treaties, Project Paperclip, what really happened after the Second World War, helped me to kind of trace it back, and understand the ET races behind it and the whole nature of like the Zetas and, the Greys that, met with our governments and how that relates to the Mars agenda. And, it's hard to say, like, any of us should never say, oh, I've got it all completely correct. I've got the absolute truth. It's like we can come close. And the most important thing is that we're all in conversation and that we're working together to figure it out, because it's stuff they don't want us to figure out. And so it's like archaeology too, you're putting the pieces together, but you're not going to have all the pieces. You can do your best with it. And I feel pretty confident that I've gotten a pretty darn clear picture at this point. And I usually wait to share anything until I'm pretty certain about what I'm saying.
Now, over the years of me interviewing people and information I've read estimates there's about 250,000 people actively living on Mars, that most humans that live on Mars, their life expectancy is 4 to 5 years because it's a different atmosphere. All different, information I found. And like you said, it's all different pieces. Who really knows what is? But when you talk about the My Labs, underground facilities, Operation Paperclip, bringing Nazis in, talking with super soldiers over the years that have vivid memories of being in My Labs, working with reptilians, working with Greys. People really need to look even deeper than that, look into history that I feel with just like the Hopi and the Mayans and just every ancient civilization that talked about the lizard people and the alligator people, and the signs are there. And if you really put into perspective with today with the technology and where lasers came from and fiber optics and things like that, and you talk to scientists that worked on those specific laser and fiber optics, they got a lot of that from ET technology. The scientists, a lot of them have come forward to talk about this. So a lot of this information is out there if you're open to look into it. Most people, like the article, just dismiss it. Oh, this is absurd. There's no one living on Mars. That's just crazy talk. But if you look at the credible people that have come forward and the scientists and just all the different people that have come forward to talk about their experience and memories, and I myself have had many experiences just since I've awakened awakened over the last, 6-7 years, and I've dove into this, and my mission is to be a voice and have this platform to get information out, and I believe that's what my mission is, acting like a neural net and bringing people together. And, I myself have been attacked in many ways, and I've done interviews to talk about that, which people can find online. And I believe very, very well that it was military, the military-industrial complex or higher races of beings that I was attacked, because a lot of them were energy attacks and things like that. So I've experienced that for myself. So I know it's real. But until you really experience it and you have that experience for yourself, then it really sets in like, wow, this stuff is real. Since you have been a speaker of truth and you're doing the circuit and traveling around the world talking about this, have you noticed that your field around you has changed now that you're sort of like in your own power, grounded out, in control, versus years ago where you weren't and you were more prone to being attacked? Like, meaning the more information you bring into yourself, the more grounded you are, the more direct you are in your mission, the less you are prone to attack. Have you noticed that?
Yes, and I love that you just said that. I mean, I've never heard anybody say it, and it's such a huge piece. And it's such a huge also validation that, you must be on the right track if whatever you're sharing and bringing in is grounding you and empowering you and actually making you healthy. And I mean, I wouldn't say life is easy. There's all sorts of things. I feel like I have my cosmic fly swatter, and I'm just like, all right, Archons, I'm whacking you away. I know how you feel. I can sense your energies, and
That's
I know
awesome.
your game, and so it's like, it's kind of like a person going camping for the first time and getting mauled by mosquitoes. It's like, okay, you're vulnerable. You're trying to figure it out. You don't necessarily, want to have it sabotage everything because you're there to have a good time and everything else is beautiful. What do you do with these pesky Archons? And so you just get smart. You get, good at it, and you learn about them and what they're drawn to, and you learn how to guard yourself, because as humans, we have an amazing survival capacity. I mean, we tap into our inner resources, and we're very intelligent because we want to be okay. We want to stay alive. And so there's no way to not tap into some level of intelligence to, protect oneself, and at the same time get an incredible education, because that is the means of empowerment, to have knowledge and to know the truth. And so that's kind of how I feel like an expert camper. I'm able to relax more, but I'm certainly, swatting, on a daily basis. And some do get in and bite me, but it's no big deal. And it's like building a spiritual immune system. I mean, we do that with germs, and as kids, we get sick and we get stronger for it. We can't live in a bubble. So being in a world of duality where there's been negative ET agendas and all sorts of scenarios that, have created these cultures that we live in that are so based on mind control. It's like we have to go through the trenches. We have to go through the frequency fences that were put in our DNA to get to the other side, to get out of this prison. And it's not a pretty place. It's not just some fluffy spiritual path, sit there in a lotus position and meditate. It's brutal. And I was like, I've always been a spiritual person, but I'm like, are you kidding me? This is what the path is? Like, I was just thinking of kind of blissing out and just
Me
sort of
too.
connecting. And it's just like, this is freaking like unreal.
Yeah. And sometimes I myself think back to like when I was living 3D, the corporate life with the Rolex and the nice cars and making money. And I was like, I thought that was difficult. Wow. Like, now that I'm awakened and aware, it just opens you up to an entirely new way of learning and unprogramming. Like Yoda says, you have to unlearn what you've learned and learn a whole new way of thinking and acting and positioning yourself and moving. And that's correct. It's not just meditating in lotus position and just ignoring everything and saying that, oh, don't lower my frequency. I don't want to hear about Mars colonies. That's going to lower my vibration. It's negative. It's like, we're not talking to those people. We're talking to people that are out there like you and me that are like, I don't give a shit what they're saying. We're talking truth. This is my experience. This is what really happened. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about some real truth that you've experienced. And it's up to the people to see what resonates with them, what they feel when your message is brought. When I'm on the airways, how do people feel when you hear me speak? Do you feel truth, or do you think it's just fluff? That's up for you to decide. I've already decided. It's your decision to decide what's your truth and do your own homework, do your information, research like you have and I have, and dig into this stuff and then decide what's crazy talk or not. Like 9/11, which still so many people want to deny that, it was an inside job. I mean, if you look at the evidence, it's overwhelming, that they played a big hand in detonating those buildings and bringing them down and the whole scam that went on with that. But if you're not open to it, you're not going to see it. It's just like the Columbus story. When the natives went out, they didn't see the Columbus ships because the Indians had never seen ships before, and it took the shaman to go out there and explain what the shaman saw was a ship. And as over the days, the shaman explained to the tribe what these ripples were coming from, it was a ship. And as the shaman explained and they opened up to what something floating on top of the water was, because they never see it, then they all started to see the ships out there. The story of the shamans and the Columbus ships when they came ashore. So, that's real. Same to UFOs. If you're not open to it, and you're not looking around and not open up to it, you're not going to see it. So that's why it's so important to get this information and get this knowledge out to people. So when we talk about resonate, Laura, what does resonate mean to you? How would you explain resonate to people that aren't familiar? I say resonate is what resonates with you with information. I get physical symptoms myself. I get my goosebumps. I feel things. My pineal gland opens up, starts buzzing. I get physical symptoms when things resonate with me. What would your explanation be to resonate? What resonates with you?
Yeah, I definitely have the same sort of thing happen. I guess, what resonates with me is when I feel almost like harmony in my brain, like it just fits right in. It's like adding another instrument to the orchestra and it is in tune. It doesn't have, a discord or a distortion. And there's a fluidity and there's a comfort zone and there's, also the ability to kind of, push the envelope and discover rediscover the familiar, and see like, that makes sense. That feels right. It might be starting off as like, wow, okay, you don't hear that every day, but it awakens something in our cellular memory. And so, the body's like, yes. And, it reacts. And when something doesn't resonate, I tend to constrict or just something doesn't feel right. My brain just all of a sudden it's just like not flowing with it. And I have to say, I think what resonates based on what you just said, that people can understand is people have to look at what's happening in the world. And it's the same sort of denial as somebody who's in a relationship where their husband or wife might be cheating on them. You don't want to believe it. You think it's crazy. Your friends might be warning you. They might be trying to have you look at the signs and you just can't see it because you've invested your life into this person or the situation. And it's too uprooting and it's too painful to accept that it's not true. But I think what we can resonate with in order to be open to this is that it's not fear-mongering to get to the truth. It's liberating because it helps us to find a healthier scenario, because who the heck wants to be lied to or betrayed? And so I try and do my presentations and simplify things metaphorically or with, analogies or in a way that people can understand so that they can, sort of see how that could relate to something else. And they can see how their behavior might respond to that something else and understand the walls that can easily come up. So anyway, resonance, it's a full body thing. And sometimes we're stubborn and something can resonate and we block it and we choose to stay programmed. But eventually, the walls come tumbling down. We will eventually manifest some sort of crisis to help us knock down that wall. And it's not till later, where we look back at that event and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that happened. It woke me up. Whether it's even an injury or a crisis or a breakup or having to lose your job. At first, it might seem very tumultuous and painful and like it doesn't resonate at all. But when you build the pieces back together and you step away and you observe it and look at it and you start to connect with the deeper message, then that resonance comes in and wisdom comes in and a breakthrough comes in, and then you get to reset the energy and you're that much more awake. But sometimes the process is like the demolition ball coming and you feel like you're in chaos and, you have nothing but misfortune and then later on you're like, wow, okay, I'm so glad I had that cancer. I'm so glad I had that breakup because it taught me how to heal. It taught me how to understand the nature of reality. If we don't explore that curiosity within ourselves to find the answers, then we're giving our power away and we're letting a doctor tell us. We're letting our governments tell us what's going on. We blindly believe, what we want to believe to keep that sort of facade alive in our life. But everybody's going to have to face one day that facade is going to expire. And it's not till it really hits home to people that they're willing to look at this stuff. You know, it has to happen to their brother, their child, or them personally for them to even want to give it the attention.
It's so empowering when you have your self-empowerment. And that's why I call this show an action-based show, because it's the self-empowerment of people that have been taken away by religion, by governments, just like you said. And without your self-empowerment, you're helpless, like in a situation where your husband's beating the crap out of you, but you wake up every day and you're like, oh, well, he loves me. And you stay in that relationship. It's you lost your self-power to stand up for yourself. And that's what football and beer, like my quote at the beginning of the show, like George Orwell said, has taken humanity. They're watching football and they're just tuned into that. And that's it. That's their life. Working 9 to 5, Sundays drinking beer and football. And that's what they think they're here for. It's like when I first was activated, I say, was when I heard the word starseed, when I met a group of light workers up in the Berkshire Mountains, and they called me a starseed, and I was like, a starseed? What's a starseed? And Stanley, this older man, said, well, that's what you are, and we're so happy you're here, and we're so thankful you're here, and you're a starseed. And I said, okay, whatever. And I went home that night to the hotel and Googled starseed, and I started reading, and I started resonating with the information, and I was like, oh my God, this sounds just like me. And I started waking up, and literally within 24 hours, I started having like remembrance of my starseed heritage, and I was just excited, and it was like I found my path. I found myself again, and I've been so lost, until I was about 30 years old, and 36 now, and I was lost and miserable, just making money and doing this, and I was miserable inside. And then I heard that word starseed, and it just activated me like boom, and I was like, wow, and I dove into the information, and I've never looked back, because I found a home, and I found, the answers to what I've always been looking for. Like you said, you've always had, when you were growing up, connected with nature and playing with crystals. So did I. I was 10, 11 years old playing with quartz crystals and this, but never really knew what they were or what was going on. But I've always had that in me. My whole life I've been pouring this information out in different ways, just really never knew. You have these webinars, and you have these different speeches and workshops. Tell us a little bit about the format. What can people learn? What are some of the topics you go into? What's sort of the information people can hear in your workshops and in your webinars and stuff that you have? Because you have quite a few coming up.
Yes. Well, I really talk about the larger picture and how all these dots connect within that larger picture to make sort of a larger story that we can make sense out of and relate to. And it really does have to do with, how we were once in these advanced civilizations. We had advanced abilities. We had our DNA strands turned on, to 12 or so. And we fell in density. We fell into this sort of 3D existence. The matrix part of it is what tries to keep us trapped in this 3D existence, in the density of physicality, where they are sort of keeping it where physicality almost holds dominion. We're in survival, we're dealing with health issues, we're dealing with, crises over resources and money, and it's like starting from scratch, and it's a whole nother level of what we're used to, actually. So it's not something very familiar. It's like, wow, what happened to us? Why aren't we able to do these things? And so a lot of the galactic memories we have, make us wonder, like, why am I here? I don't belong here. A lot of people don't feel that way. And so I just sort of talk about the origins of all that, the different fallen founder races and the ones that are trying to assist us, and how everything changed when we sank in lower density, and what that meant to the planetary body, and how it was sort of recreated as an ascension planet. It was seeded with a 13-dimensional monadic core, which is why it's an ascension planet. But it's no different than a seed holding information about how it's eventually going to be a blossoming rose. Along the way, it has to go through the leaf phase. It has to go through, sprouting out of the ground. But if everybody says, oh, it can't bloom, then that's like saying, oh, we can't ascend. It's very organic. It's just a part of our unfoldment. And the whole idea after we sank in lower density was to rebuild our DNA over the course of time, to learn the right use of power, which is where the tree of knowledge and duality comes in, where we see good and evil, and we're able to create a contrast so that we can start to make wiser choices, because our choices led to this sinking. Not everybody was at fault, of course, but it's a negative ego construct. We're in a free will universe. And so the ego has been very interested in, wow, okay, what does it mean to be in power? But it lost its connection to love and unity and the balance of the masculine and feminine and the right and left brain and, science and spirituality. Everything got divided And so we're very polarized, and it's very hard to come back into balance when we just come across each other and we're only swinging from one way or the other, and to these different extremes. And we see that with religion, and then hedonism, and like some of the new age deceptions. Everybody's like missing the mark. It's like, well, what about just being balanced, where we're sort of working with all of it, but from a place of integrity, where we can have the independence and freedom on a spiritual level, but we can understand, some of the values and the morality that was connected with religion without it being so confining and dogmatic and controlling and limiting. And they want us to be polarized because as long as we're out of balance, these controller energies, these parasitic forces can feed on us because they're the negative ego. They chose negative ego and compromised their DNA on purpose in order to maintain control. And we're trying to rise above it. So the matrix like addicts us to this reptilian sort of mentality, and we, have lost all connection. So I talk about the myths. That's the cosmic mythologist part. The astrology part talks about the alignments and how it's all progressing over the course of the last 26,000 years or so. 26,000 years ago was when the dark technologies were put into underneath the earth to affect the ley lines in our DNA so we wouldn't be able to heal. So I help people, understand that. And I encourage people to cut themselves a lot of slack for, just being human and feeling flawed. A lot of it's a programming. A lot of it is not our true nature. But a lot of it is us also being children and learning how to manage the ego and manage, existence and to see who we're not, to remember who we are, to learn the right use of power and reconnect with the heart, which is what the Venus transits are all about and what the Mayans understood. And so I shed a lot of light on, this shift time, the stellar activation cycle, 2012 and the Venus transits and, how it takes us into 2027, which everybody thinks that the window closes in 2017, but that's not true. I talk about the 13th gate and the divine feminine and rebalancing with the masculine and how that opens a gateway and how it restores our DNA because we sort of folded on ourselves. We're in a 15-dimensional time matrix and we folded in on ourselves. And so the lower and the higher are merged together, and then they created a glitch and this veil that separates us from accessing it. And so we have this matrix and then we have this organic ascension timeline. So the whole nature of artificial timelines are to keep us off track. When we integrate these energies, both our light and dark, our masculine and feminine, and we don't leave anything out and we come into balance, then we, are able to steer our vessel without getting caught in the traps, choosing either the light or the dark and not finding a way to balance both and create the alchemy that's necessary to completely restore ourselves. And so I talk about how to do that and what soul alchemy and global alchemy is. And then the Mars agenda, what does that mean? Mars relates to the solar plexus and the negative ego. How do we heal the negative ego? We bust the Mars agenda. We expose it. We bust the betrayal and the cheating of that negative ego mentality. We bring it to the heart, the Venus energy, and we forgive it. We purify it within ourselves, and we expose it. And then the lies and the secrets are out on the table, and then we can choose a partner that doesn't betray us, and we can divorce the governments and all the crap that has been leading us astray this whole time. And so I also look at creation like a love story. It's time to divorce the jerk and get back in touch with true love within ourselves and in the larger picture. And unity consciousness relates to that. Our DNA relates to the stargates on Earth and what this shift is all about. And that's what raises our frequency, is to remember these things. And then all of a sudden, we're shifting out of all the contamination and we're purifying in this, wholeness. Because in wholeness and balance, you can't be attacked by archons or parasites. It's the imbalance that they feed on.
And one of my great heroes, Mr. Buckminster Fuller, also said that you cannot go against and defeat the system that's not working. You just create the new one to make the old one obsolete. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what we're all doing together, is getting these new technologies out there, getting the information out there so we can raise our vibration to make the old paradigm obsolete. And that's what we're doing. Your website is cosmicgaia2012.com. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show and for your truth and for spreading the light you do. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You're listening to StarSeedRadio.com.